Hey everyone, it's DrRic. Today's tutorial is about cannabis journaling. So if you are a medical marijuana user or if you are a recreational user, please try to watch the whole video. But the objective for medical marijuana use, or for that matter any supplement use, whether it's a vitamin, a mineral, an herb, or medical cannabis, is to help the body balance whatever imbalance it's going through and then fix itself. Now, I've spoken with other videos in the past, so I'll put them down below. This is the one I did on cannabis color coding, but I've done a couple of videos trying to explain the science behind medical cannabis, and it is still being looked upon with scrutiny by some factions of the population, and that's okay. A lot of baby boomers, but that's okay because it takes some getting used to. The weed from the 70s and 80s or 60s is much different than the medical cannabis products today. That being said, these are all products, and I'm not only a doctor that certifies, I'm also a caregiver for a patient. So that's why I have the opportunity to, number one, accumulate a vast amount of rejected supplements or products that patients didn't find helpful. Also to use as dummy or props from the patient that I'm taking care of. So the idea is I would still try to avoid, if you understand the color coding, I'd still try to avoid flower. I think there's so many products here, and there's not one bud that you can get to the point of the therapeutic effects without having to smoke. I just think smoking is tough on the lungs. Vaping is tough on the lungs with some of my patients. But again, because there's so many different options, I think you can still dial it in depending on how you approach this. So most important thing is, has we established top 3 symptoms for what we are trying to control, then we can go on with those 3 symptoms and try to attack them one at a time. So I'm pretty conservative. And I really think embracing CBD would be the goal, but in some cases THC, so let me just talk about that. CBD, or the medical marijuana plant, if you break down the products or the active ingredients in the leaf, you can generate oil and or smoke to the point where you have active ingredient get into your bloodstream. So once it gets in the bloodstream, then you have the effect, and we can kind of dial in the effect, but the objective is how do you get it in? Again, smoking is one way. I just think it's irritating. Vaping is another way. It's when you take the marijuana leaf, somebody distills it and pressurizes it and takes the oil out, and then you have the oil in something like this. So this is a vape and a vape cartridge. This is a battery, and that's the vape part. I don't think there's anything left in here, but so you just inhale through here. The temperature of this battery takes this oil and burns it at a high level. So hopefully the byproducts of irritation aren't there. Typically vape cartridges can be either these things or what's called disposables. And so that's a way to get that product in through the bloodstream by passing through the lung lining. Lung lining is very delicate, and I really think that you can get product in, but it depends on if you have irritation or not. The good thing about the lung, using the lung has the way to get into the bloodstream, is that it will get you the oil and or the cannabidiol, CBD, fast. You can also get THC in that, but if you are one with post-traumatic stress disorder, then you might need something really quick. If you're having inflammation, it's just really getting bad, the back pain or an ankle sprain or a headache, you might want something quick. So CBD or THC, doesn't matter which cannabinoid you want, but it'll get in quick with vaping if you don't have any lung issues. And the idea there is that you can rescue yourself, but you have to watch out for the side effects. So if you're using it for post-traumatic stress disorder, that's great. But if you suddenly get paranoid or you have problems with side effects, then you're overdosing. And that's why I wanted to do this cannabis journal. So I want my patients to be able to take one product, use it for a prolonged amount of time, I'd say a week, and this is the journal. So cannabis journal is the objective. This is something that you keep on your own. I don't like to have anybody publish this in their household or make it known. I think it's dangerous, especially if there are teenagers in the house. And another reason why you probably won't want to smoke, because when you smoke the leaf, you will smell the house, you'll smell your clothes up, it'll smell in your hair, so it is detectable. Even though you think you might not be, I've had patients come in here and I probably got a level in my bloodstream just from smelling it off of their clothes in the office. So please try to avoid. So I would usually do, hopefully you can see this, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. This is obviously on a little journal or a composite notebook. And I put the product in the next lane or a column and the ratio of the product. It's very important to know the ratio. And when you have a ratio, it essentially means how much THC is in your product and how much CBD is in your product. So I think there's something here with a ratio. This one is Avexia. Hopefully you can see that. I'm not sure if it's coming in, but the Avexia has a printed ratio here of 14:1. That means there's 14 parts CBD to 1 part THC. You're always going to be able to have in any product, whether it's a tablet, a capsule, some vapes, gummies, there's always going to be a ratio. Now, if there's no ratio, here's another one. That's 2:1. This is an RSO oil, just to show you. This is an oil that it's a thick oil. There's a lot left in this thing. There's a thick oil that you use to apply underneath the tongue. It's supposed to get absorbed into the bloodstream underneath the tongue, which is another way to do it, orally. And it goes through the bloodstream. It has its effects. 2:1 means there's 2 parts CBD to 1 part THC. So you will have more of the inflammation control. That's what CBD does. So CBD, according to my color coding, I took this from New York's color coding, is mostly a blue ratio, or a blue color for that ratio. THC, if it's mostly THC in the product and you want to just have the psychogenic effect, the high effect, you mostly get the red ratio. I'm not going to get into that, but just please review my video for the color coding. So when you have a product, you put the ratio down and you put the dose. For example, you can say with vaping, you take 1 hit or 1 inhale of the vape every night for 5 to 7 nights straight. That's how I would play it. I would do it every night for 5 to 7 nights straight. I wouldn't have any other variables like changing your diet, changing your sleep pattern, changing your exercise, changing your food. I would just keep it stable because you want to know the side effects to this and the good effects to this. So week 1, product and the ratio and the dose, how many times a day. And then the side effects you keep here for the entire time, because it might take a while before you feel side effects. And you can also put good effects here as well. And then week 2, maybe you'll increase the dose to, for example, on the vape, twice a day vaping. So you do that same time every day and you keep the inhale the same and you continue on with watching the side effects for another 5 to 7 days. So on and so forth. That's the way I would do it. Also, in a lot of cases, I'll say for the tablet or the tincture, I might say this is tincture, which comes in a dropper form, and it comes out in oil. You put this underneath the tongue, a little bit tasty, not so great tasting, but it's weird to have oil in your tongue. Or you have the tablet. So if you go with tincture or tablet, you can at least say in your journal, this first week I did 1 tablet a day. I did half a dropper measured on this dropper thing today. And you look for the side effects, same time, same amount every day, whether it's tablet or dropper or vape or topical. And then you watch for side effects. If no side effects, then you increase the dose to twice a day perhaps, because a lot of these products will have a half-life where they last about 6 to 8 hours. Now that it depends on the vehicle, the way the product is getting into the bloodstream. Again, if you put it in through the lungs, it's a fast rise and it's a fast fall. If you eat it, it's slow rise and a slow fall. If you put it on topically, you might not get it into the bloodstream that aggressively. I think topical actually is more for older people with thin skin, or people that are apprehensive about taking anything orally or inhaled. Or if you just have psoriasis or eczema, this is great stuff. Acne too. So, but again, that, I don't think you have to worry about side effects too much unless you're older. So you don't really have to journal that. But these other things, even the gummies, these gummies, some people will take a gummy to save it, and they'll only do half of a gummy. So you really have to, if you're going to do half, stick with half, do it for the entire week, jot down the side effects, and then move forward. The way the CBD works, and I like, you should read about these things with references. I have a couple references on books and lectures that I've attended, so pretty good primers for learning about this stuff. You should learn, because it is a plant, just like a recipe. You have to learn about the plant, learn about the flavor, learn about how to manipulate the plant and how it affects your body. So it's nice to have the stepwise approach to figuring out, here's why. Because that product that you have, whether it's topical or a pill or a vape, the cultivators will grow and produce for a season, and then the next season that same plant can change, especially if it's grown outside, depending on the variability of the weather, the amount of water, the temperature, ambient, inside and outside. So the plant responds, whether it's, I would get away from sativa and indica. We're just talking about ratios here. So whether it's a species or not, the ratios can change around. The taste and the effect will change around, I believe, depending on the season. So if you depend on something like a Vexia or this vape, and then in the next season you figure the vape isn't available, well, you can start the experiment all over again and spend more money trying to figure out, okay, this one's good, this one's not good. Or you can just go to the ratio that you determined is good for you, as per your experiment in your journal from like 3 months ago, and you just, if the product isn't available, you just go for the next product that's about the same ratio. So that's the way you shortcut it, because not all products will always be available, and sometimes the products that are available from the same company will change in their potency. It can sometimes change in the color coding or the ratios that the product is, or it can change its effectiveness, and you hope that with these products being controlled by the Fed, you have to have the exact component, or whatever's on the label has to be proven. If it's over the counter, it doesn't have to be proven, because the USDA just says that, okay, you over the counter growers, you just have to prove. So anytime we challenge you, you have to come up with the information. But in medicinal cannabis, you have to have a certificate of analysis. You have to break down the products, so they have to produce exactly. And you can ask for a certificate of analysis from most of the companies out there, including the hemp companies. So that's the way I would challenge my folks who just use hemp for the CBD instead of worrying about the medical marijuana. You can still ask your hemp companies for a certificate of analysis, and they hopefully will give you something that was recently tested. So when it's tested, it's exact. When it's exact, like that certificate analysis, you see how much exactly is CBD or THC or CBN or THCA. Those are all acronyms for the type of cannabinoid that's found, or the active ingredient that's found in the plant as it is processed. So without getting too in the weeds with this, the basic thing I wanted to get across was that if you're experimenting and you're trying to figure out how to save money, what works for you, side effects, if you go aggressive and you just smoke a leaf, you're going to get the entire component of that flower into your bloodstream, and you might not like the side effects. Now, if you're just going recreational, you want to get high, that's fine, but this is more for my patients who are microdosing just to affect life. And then the cool thing is that I think the workhorse for medical cannabis is going to be your CBD, but I think that it's nice when you can have a touch of THC or a nice ratio to push that CBD to work even better. So CBD can affect brain as far as CB1 receptors. CBD can affect the immune system and the periphery as far as CB2 receptors. Those are two receptors that are everywhere in the body. And THC, which is the psychoactive ingredient, the cannabinoid that's found in marijuana, THC will affect CB1 receptors. Very aggressively. So if you want to just turn off the PTSD or the anxiety or the insomnia, then you go for that. THC is going to be your go-to. And as far as the ratio, whether you go to full THC or a ratio, you should still take it down because the product will change. Now, if you want more inflammation, cancer control, resetting of your homeostasis, then you want more CBD. But it's hard to eliminate THC totally out of your product. So just know the side effects. So that is important. Sometimes with homeostasis, when things are off, say the hypothalamus is supposed to talk to is controlling several different glands, the thyroid, the adrenals back here on top of your kidneys, and the gonads. So it's called the HPA, HPT, HPG axis. And again, without getting into the weeds, there's supposed to be nice communication between the three and other things. When you're getting older and you've been hit by multiple medical problems and you're being stressed out and you're just kind of inching your way along with the changes of decades and taking on more responsibility and getting more and more damaged inflammation, whether it's psychological, dietary, or physical, you're going to have some dysfunction. And sometimes using CBD properly will reset that function. Reset the talk between the hypothalamus and the thyroid, the talk between the hypothalamus and the adrenals, the talk between the hypothalamus and the gonads, or the talk between the gonads, the adrenals, and the thyroid altogether. So it's nice because CBD seems to, because it's a receptor that's found in it's the most pronounced receptor or dominant receptor in the body. And when you have a receptor that's stimulated by CBD, and it affects the nucleus of a cell, you can have the cells work better. So that's where the gene stimulation comes. And again, CBD seems to do that. It upregulates certain anti-inflammatory genes, about 100 to 300, and it downregulates certain pro-inflammatory genes, again, I think there's a little more on the pro-inflammatory side. So this is why the chronic use or the constant use of CBD in the bloodstream, I think, is good. So even if you are an anxiety sufferer or a PTSD sufferer, I still think having a baseline amount of CBD will still affect the way the brain works. So it is important to keep your dose. So again, the problem with just trying to get CBD in is you're not going to be able to feel the effects that quick. You might be able to feel the side effects quick, but if you're just trying to temper how much you use by saying, I didn't feel high, I'm not dizzy, I'm going to hit myself with more. That's not the way to do it. You want to slowly build up CBD levels. You want to watch for side effects. I think after about 4 weeks when you've maxed on your dose, 2 to 3 times a day is really max, with a little touch-up, extra rescue at night perhaps, or during painful situations or stressful situations. I think when you've maxed, you just wait and watch, especially with regards to CBD. I believe the effects of CBD, you can say, will take effect and have its peak at about the 4 to 6 week mark. If nothing happens, then you should contact me or your cultivator or your patient care representative if they're good at the dispensary and fine-tune that. But that's my objective, is to save money. Otherwise, you'll be doing experiment every week, every month, spending money on stuff you might not want. That's where all these leftovers are from. And again, that's like the $30 each, so you can go through a lot of money. So the other thing to also keep, in addition to the cannabis journal that you keep private and you just get really good at knowing your products and how they work, is a mood journal. I thought about this because of one of my patients, because sometimes when we're dealing with pain, chronic pain especially, you can be grouchy, you can be anxious, you can be depressed. And when you play around with one of these products, or just medical cannabis, it will hopefully affect you in a good way. We're looking for side effects up here as far as how to dial in the cannabis product, but sometimes you won't notice it, but family members will notice that you're grouchy, or you're irritated, or you're just depressed and withdrawn. And so sometimes if you keep this private, cannabis journal, but mood journal out in the open, I think it's fair game for anybody in the household to say, this week you're an asshole, or you're really depressed and withdrawn, you weren't talking to me. This week you were really an asshole, you were really hot, you were irritable. So I think it's nice to just put that just as an X and an X. You don't have to get into the pros of you were this and you did this and you did this. That's just going to instill pain and argument. So this is just coaches' ideas, or a neutral party saying what they noticed about you. Because it's sometimes in self-reflecting, you won't be able to notice it yourself. You'll be able to notice side effects, but you might not be able to notice mild changes, subtle changes in mood. And that's what we need other people to comment on. So again, I would keep it really easy. I wouldn't do narrative. I just a positive or a negative, cool or hot. And that way, as you dial yourself in, if everybody notices you're getting more hot and irritated, maybe you have to dial yourself in a little more. So cannabis journal, side effects, product ratio, week. And then you might have to repeat that month to month until you find a good ratio. And then a mood journal until you find your groove, find your recipe, and you're dialed in. Once you're dialed in, you probably don't need a mood journal that everybody has to comment on. Hopefully, also, don't forget, when all this is all said and done, if you got yourself dialed in, you, if it's physical, have to get back to physical therapy and rehab. Or you, if it's emotional and mood, you have to get back to your counseling. I think just using CBD or THC to change the dynamics in every cell in your body is important. Brain, muscle, tissue, fiber, fat. But it's also important to build after that. So this is not just the Band-Aid. It's a treatment, but the treatment also has to include you fixing things from before. You know, we can always heal each other up, but we can also more readily break each other down. So I think it's important to fix yourself from the inside here, but also fix yourself from the outside with therapy. So don't forget that. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of an idea about what to do with dialing yourself in. Please don't forget to hit the link down below for color coding and trying to get a baseline to how to interpret the right products, and look for side effects. And by all means, please try to read on what you can as far as videos, reliable videos. Leafly has some good information about products, and if you're on a budget, Leafly can help you, say, for example, take the RSO, put it into baked goods so you don't have to spend so much money on gummies. Gummies are really great, but they're expensive. Tablets are also great, but they're expensive. So the cheapest is a flower, but again, I've already told you about the flower. So again, all this information. We'll also be giving lectures coming up, at least locally in Illinois. If you're in the area, keep on watching my webpage, Herbal 411. And I'll post when I do local appearances and community engagement. So hopefully this give you a little boost up on how to dial yourself in. Comment down below if you have a way that you've done your own dialing in or your own journaling, or if there is an Excel spreadsheet that's easier than my big chalkboard here. So otherwise, I'll see you subscribe down below, and I'll see you at the next tutorial. Hey, one thing I forgot to mention is that when you're doing a limited study or a journal for cannabis and you're trying to dial in your dose, you have to keep your dosing straight. So if it's a vape, you should practice the same inhale, the same amount of seconds of holding your breath, and the same amount of, I guess, diaphragmatic, that's diaphragm, strength. So having a set, not just taking a big puff and letting it go. So the idea with holding breath is that the longer you can hold your breath without passing out, and that usually doesn't happen, the more time you have exposing the vape to the lining of the lung. And the lining of the lung is very, very thin, almost one cell layer only, and it allows for the active ingredient in the vape to be transmitted from the vaporized oil through the one layer of cell, that's the lining, into the blood vessel. So the blood vessels sit right underneath the lining. So when you can transmit the active ingredient, which is one of the cannabinoids, or several of the cannabinoids, THC, CBD, THCA, CBDN, whatever it is, if you can transmit it through the lining into the bloodstream, it goes to the receptors immediately. From blood, actually from lung, sac, through that one layer of cell, into the bloodstream and circulating everywhere. So the longer you hold that breath, the more diffusion occurs, because truthfully, I think in hemp it's only about 10% bioavailable, and then in a lot of products, especially the vape, you are exhaling 50% of that whatever is in the vape before you inhaled. So you have a lot of waste, but that's just nature of the beast, unless you take a tablet, and that's a little different. So we'll get to that in a second. But as far as the vape is concerned, hold your breath for as long as possible. If you have COPD, I don't think you're going to have a problem with it, because built-in reflex for the body is if you're developing high amounts of carbohydrate, your brain will automatically say, take a breath. Otherwise, you'd have kids that would be passing out and dying from holding their breath when they don't want to eat their food. So I had that argument brought up when I mentioned I'd like my patients to hold the breath as long as possible, take the volume in of breath you can and measure it, know it, at least I guess you can't measure it unless you have a peak flow, know it, can continue with that same technique of inhalation every time you do that first week of dosing. Or if you go straight to 2 times a day, same thing. If you take pills, or if you take the sublingual tincture, you have to have the same measurement in the dropper at all times. You also have to keep it under the tongue for the same amount of seconds at all times, and you have to keep it to the same dose. And I would usually do it before eating, because we hope that with the sublingual tincture or the RSO oil, that it gets through the blood vessels underneath the tongue. Those are a couple layers thick compared to the lung lining, but inadvertently you're always going to swallow some of that. Then it goes into the digestive tract. That would be the tincture, the RSO oil, the resin oil. And once it gets into the digestive tract, it has to go through absorption in the lining of the gut, and then it goes to the liver. And once it gets to the liver, product is usually broken down and metabolized. And it doesn't just metabolize to something that's inert. That metabolite will go on to still stimulate later on down the line in a different way. That's why you sometimes have delayed response when you take edible. And tincture and RSO oil, or the tablets or capsules, there's actually sprays now too. If it goes into the mouth, it'll go into the gut, and you have to prepare for that second pass effect, or sorry, first pass effect. So but that could be a good thing. You can save money if you want to base your journaling or your effective cannabis journal response on prolonged effect. If you want for inflammation control, then you got it. Again, follow the rules that have in this video before this. If you take a tablet, can't really mess that up, because you'd swallow the tablet, gets into the gut, gets digested, goes to the liver, gets broken down. There's your active ingredients. Capsule, same thing. They're meant to be digested in the stomach. I would say taking those things on an empty stomach at least an hour before eating, and no alcohol, probably no coffee, that'll probably get you your best absorption. The tinctures, it's up to you, but again, hold it in the mouth, underneath the tongue if you can, for a desired amount of time, and I wouldn't dilute it with water. There are some syrups that you have to dilute. You can play around with that, but at that point in time, that's being swallowed. That's not going under the tongue. So absorption via the lung, we talked about. Keep that breath the same. Keep the technique the same. Hold it for as long as you can. Don't worry about carbon dioxide accumulation. You'll be fine. Now, if you have lung disease, you probably should make sure it's okay with your lung doctor first, because I don't know, you might be on an inhaler, who knows, but This is not medical advice. This is just what I do for my patients. If you take the tincture, measured amount, keep it on the tongue for a sec, count to a 60, I guess, and then you can swallow it. RSO oil, same amount every time under the tongue. I think that after you take the tincture or the oil, sometimes taking a carbonated beverage and swishing your mouth around like you're gargling would be a nice way to get everything into your stomach. So it's the entire dose is in sublingual and into the digestive tract. As far as the dosing of the pills, tablets, same thing. Keep it the same time every day, an hour before eating, empty stomach preferably. And topical is totally different. Kind of depends on the skin. If you get it to areas of the skin that you don't have hair, it might get absorbed better. Sometimes using it to this place, this is the elbow or the back of the knee, popliteal, that might get you better absorption. Putting it onto areas with hair or a lot of fat can change the absorption, might not get in, so try to do it to those areas. Patches are a little bit different. I'll probably have to talk about those at a later later time. So hopefully this gives you a little of an addendum on how to save money and get better levels up. But subscribe down below, hit the like button if you like this or you found it informative. Otherwise, if you have your ways that you've worked with your product to get a good level up and maintain it and get dialed in, put it in the comment section. Otherwise, I'll see you at the next tutorial.